Hey everybody, this is Daniel Lee, not on a Melee Science, but we're gonna have a Melee Autonomy roundtable in a few days. Likely, depending on when you watch this YouTube video, it might the roundtable may or may not have already happened. And I've been thinking a lot about things that have been going on, but I feel like I need to talk about one core issue and kind of where I'm at right now in regards to banning players and what kind of authority that people should have in the community to do such things. So this isn't going to be a conclusive video. This isn't going to be necessarily a conclusive video. It's more like where my thoughts are currently, and also what are some of the questions that not only do I have to answer, but I feel like anyone who's kind of having a stake in this conversation will have to answer on their own. And so first and foremost, to just give you guys a little bit of background, and I hope I don't introduce anything new to the table in terms of the history and context of this video. So if you guys are a little bit out of the loop, I'm not going to try to bring new drama that's hidden, but just recap what's happened so far. So currently we have a top player named the Shizwiz who wants to make a return to the community. He's had some, he's roughly has been a top 5 player at his peak. A lot of people love his Falco. He's been, involved in the community from around like 08 to around 2012 or 13-ish. Took a step back, and in light of why this is so controversial, it's because the Shizwiz has had some run-ins with the law. This is public information at this point, and he's also had an incident with another smasher back in 2013. You can read about it. I'm not going to post anything, but because that's already public, it's already out there, you can Google search it. I'm not trying to necessarily stir a witch hunt, but I feel like giving a little bit of context will help kind of frame and explain things for people that aren't as much in the loop. So one of the big things that a lot of people really said is like, okay, is this, given the criminal record and the history, should it be allowed back in the community? A lot of people posted their thoughts. And when you make rules and you make a ruling on something, it comes with a lot of precedence, meaning that a lot of people will use whatever people say about one example as precedence for future action. So needless to say, I have to be very careful about the decisions that we make. I have to be very careful because there are huge implications on what I say now, which could affect other smashers down the road. Fundamentally, I think the core issue is this: how much if we're to boil it down, it really fundamentally comes down to trust. It comes down to how much can people vouch for the Shizwiz in terms of his character and his actions in relation to the safety of other people within the community. So a lot of people do feel a little bit hesitant, they feel a little bit scared, or they might feel a little bit scared of bringing other people. Maybe it's their girlfriend, their child, or their significant other to an event, knowing that the Shizwiz may be there. Because back then, in 2008, 2009, the community was a lot smaller, but then you have to look at it in a wider scale, that you're vouching for a person to thousands of people, and you may not know what happens. So I think that's one core issue here, is whether or not a person can be trusted. And I'm going to extend this argument to not really just talk about the Shizwiz, but when we're talking about people in general. Does Shizwiz garner enough trust and credit that he can come back to the community based on his history and based on his reform, that we can say, yeah, like there's nothing that's going to happen that's going to be difficult, or we're not worried about people's safety. So I think that's one core argument. I think there are some residual things here, and this is something I've debated back and forth. Sorry about the noise. Is how much does a person's outside the community behavior play a role in the decision making of what happens within the community? So let's just for the sake of an example here, and I'm thinking of the whole process here, so just kind of stay with me. Let's say hypothetically the Mimi incident at EVO 2013 did not happen, and all we knew about the Shizwiz was his criminal record, the assault that supposedly happened at a gas pump liquor shop. Should incidences that happen outside the community play a role in banning or doing corrective action within the community? And I think it's a really important topic to debate, because I think there's a spectrum, and One thing for me personally that I would never want to happen is a gathering of witch hunts. And what I mean is that, let's say somebody has a personal grudge with another person within the community. I don't want there to be the power to say like, hey, like I'm going to search on Google for this person and try to dig up any dirt that I can find. And if we find something incriminating, we're going to publicly shame him out of the community. And I never really want to play a role where I'm going through people's personal drama. And it's something I feel very uncomfortable with, and that's something I never want to be a part of, is being involved in this person's dirty drama or this person's run-in with the law. Of course, there are limits. The upper limit here is what if somebody's public record came out and this person was, a child molester, or this guy is on bail for murdering somebody. Then I think there's some rationale here that this person should probably not be at a venue where there are teenagers and 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds at the venue. So I think there are some cases where it's pretty obvious that a person should not be allowed at the event or if people found out in a very public manner that this person has done things that would cause harm to other people in that manner. Aside from Shiz, I have known people across, all of Smash history. I've been involved in the community for a good 12 years. I've known people that have gone to jail. I've known people that have been involved in gangs, that have done drugs, that have dealt drugs. I've known people that have rumored to have murdered people outside the community. And so because the community is a lot larger, this is where things come to light. And it's really tough for me, and I think Phil really brought a good point, and this is just kind of me thinking out loud, is if a person, paid their time, they paid the cost of their crime, they were judged on behalf, and, they paid their jail time, they did whatever the punishment was, should they be allowed back in the community? Let's say, the community gets really large, and I'm going to use the Shiz Wiz, for example. Let's say if for whatever reason he got banned for life, or banned for the time being, and 15 years down the road he has a kid that wants to go to a Smash tournament, then should he be allowed? And that's where I think a lifetime ban is really silly. It's like, okay, like what does a person need to do to show that they're reformed? And I think that's an important conversation to have, not with just the Shiz, but we've had histories of reform in the past where we've had other players who've been banned for different reasons. They've showed remorse, they've had, good community behavior, and then they came back and everything was fine. I have to really think, well, if the Shiz gets a ban for whatever reason, what would convince people to say like, hey, this person, show that he's done what he needs to do to show that he regained people's trust? It would be silly down the road if 15 years, down the road, the Shiz was, if you were banned, to not be able to come back to the community. So there has to be some dialogue here. So those are some of my running thoughts in regards to that. I think another, really big interesting thing here that I've heard, and, what if, the court of law is not really, playing its role. So let's extend it. So we've talked about things outside the community, but I am also aware of instances where we kind of say, let the police handle it, let people handle it, where we've had a lot of conflict. And one example that comes to mind is with the FGC and Sherry, who has a stalker, but the police won't do anything about it. Well, how do we protect the safety, if there's a stalker within the community, or if there's something that the law won't handle in regards to the safety of members within the community, because the police won't do anything about that stalker. And she documented this like really interesting case that was really creepy when you read the testimonies of it. Like, what do we do when the police can't really act on behalf? Like, how do we protect them, or how do we deal with interpersonal drama where a person may have like sexually assaulted another community member, or there's violence but it never got settled with the police? Are those people allowed? Those are questions I have personally that I haven't really fully thought through, but that's something important to consider. We've had instances in the past where the police haven't got involved in interpersonal Smash drama, but Smashers know about what happened. And a lot of people get scared of people who may exhibit unsafe behavior. So that's one thing I have to really think about that I haven't really come to conclusions with. What else is there that I really need to think about? Um, I mean, all in all, like, I hate ruling on these things. I've always tweeted out that I don't want to really. I want to just play Smash. I want to be around a community that loves to just play Smash. And one argument that I've heard is that Smash has been an escape for a lot of players in the community. And I've heard testimonies where it weren't for Smash, they would get into a life of drugs and gangs. And is it right for a person that's had some instances of violence to not be able to use their escape to escape from that life? And I'm sure a lot of top players and a lot of community figures would be living, going down this really bad road if it wasn't for Smash. So do we take that away from those people? So those are kind of just, and then, on the flip side of things, I have to really think there are a lot of people, and maybe this is the lack of dialogue in general, that genuinely do feel scared, or they do feel very uncomfortable. And I think, it's really tough to say, like, hey, like, on one hand, there's a group of people that really want the shiz back in the community. I mean, from my personal experiences, I've never really had, I've interacted with the shiz personally very few times. I haven't had anything negative experiences. We've chatted a little bit. So my personal experiences have been, okay. But I know a lot of other people, feel scared, and they genuinely feel scared, and to ignore people's concerns and their fears and to not dialogue and to simply dismiss them, I also don't feel is very right. Just because a person has a name doesn't mean that we side with the top player or the known community figure. I think we have to scrutinize it and at least have some dialogue. So I think there is some important things that the shiz needs to do to convince and regain the trust of a lot of people who would be very fearful of him. I recognize that he did apologize on Twitter. He's posted up his anger management records, but I think for him, if he wants to build a case for himself here, he needs to really reassure people, not just his own group of friends, but the people who are scared, to say, like, hey, like, what can I do to help convince you that I'm a changed person? And I think that's going to be really important. So those are overall my general thoughts on things. As far as a ruling or definitive conclusion, I think one thing we have to realize here is that no matter what I say, no matter what Melee on Me says, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we don't really have this sovereign control over the community. Meaning, if I make a ruling and some TO in Central Florida wants to invite Shiz to his tournament, I can't do anything to stop it. I can't do anything to enforce anything. If another TO or a big regional or major wants to bring people to their tournament, I don't really have power to say anything. The only thing I can really do is encourage best practices and good communication. I think, and just make recommendations. I can't make this overarching Riot Games or Blizzard type or Valve type of ruling here. So I don't want anyone to get the idea that, like, I can do that. If you want to have a local with your own tournament or your own Smash Fest that include people, like, I mean, by all means, I can make recommendations on why it may or may not be a good idea, but fundamentally it's down to the TOs. So if you disagree with the TO's decision, or you agree with the TO's decision, or you disagree with the figureheads, the best thing you can really do is just talk to your local community and local TOs. So those are my general thoughts. I don't have too much other than that. Maybe this doesn't add anything to the dialogue. I'm still learning. I'm still, trying to get a lot of perspective here, and I don't want to make any decisions hastily. So hopefully this continues the dialogue. That goes beyond the shiz on how we go about protecting and making sure that our community is going in the right direction.